Morning. My name is Barry Somerstein. I'm a partner with Greenspoon Martyr. We're here today to discuss the impact of real estate post-pandemic. It seems like about a year ago, we had some of the panelists that we had here today talking about the impact of what was going to happen because of COVID. I don't think anybody could have envisioned the dramatic activity in real estate that occurred from that time till today. So it seems like, although it was a year, it seems like it was just a few months ago that occurred. So we're going to have our three panelists talk about the impact on real estate in post-pandemic times. And let me introduce them very quickly. We have Gregg Logan, who's the Director of Community and Resort Services for RCLCO. Gregg and his firm work with leading real estate professionals and firms all across the country, providing advisory work, marketing, evaluation, and strategies in real estate. We also have Jay Parker, who's the Chief Executive or Executive Officer of Douglas Elliman. Douglas Elliman is a premier residential real estate firm both in South Florida with offices all across the country and overseas, who is very involved in the residential real estate market. Jay has been actively involved, not only running the company, but helping expand it and giving it leadership. The final speaker is Jimmy Tate. Jimmy is president of Tate Capital. Jimmy and his brother Kenny, along with their father Stanley, have been in the real estate business for, I guess, over 70 years. They've been involved in every aspect of real estate that you could possibly imagine, from commercial real estate, hotels, offices, single family homes, condominium, hotel. They were actively involved in workouts, both in the acquisition of distressed property and helping financial institutions in workouts. Stanley was the presidential appointee for the RTC. So given that brief introduction, I'd like to first have Gregg give a brief overview of the real estate market as he sees it today. Gregg?
Thank you, Barry. Let me share this. Okay, let me jump right into kind of the overall real estate outlook, and just going to go through by segment very quickly, just as a setup for our conversation. I think the thing that we're all excited about is the really improved consumer fundamentals and the very strong demand that we're seeing, and we expect as the vaccine, continues to, people are well vaccinated, we're seeing a return to economic growth, and retail sales and consumer spending are all expected to be growing. We have a very good forecast from NRF at growth between 6.5% and 8.2% this year. Well up from where we were before, and as the national economy continues to come back to life, and we expect the retail revenues to be a much more impressive than 2020. Although we certainly saw grocery stores doing okay this last year. Savings is way up. People have a lot of savings, and that creates the opportunity for a lot of pent up demand. Real estate, residential real estate is one of the places where people have been spending that money since they couldn't spend on a lot else. Market fundamentals in the office sector, we don't really see that recovering until at least the second half of 2021, and that's really tied to more consistent job growth, and even then we're thinking that people are not fully coming back to the office, that people will still be working from home a couple of days a week across many sectors, and that will keep office demand a little bit subdued. The industrial market is a real bright spot and has been all year, particularly with needing to have greater supplies of goods and services closer to where people are. So sort of a lot of last mile industrial, but really across the industrial market, leasing momentum has been very strong. Demand continues to forge ahead. Rents, year over year from this time to last year, they were up about 4%, a little over 4%. Absorptions are setting records, and and vacancies have steadily decreased down to a fairly tight market. Housing starts, we're seeing a very strong market there. We did see a little bit of a fall off in April. Part of that is that we're seeing a lag between units that have already been permitted and started, just because demand is so strong. The industry is having a hard time keeping up with the pace of demand. I think for many years following the Great Recession, pre-pandemic even, we were undersupplying the market. There was a lot of conservatism. We were not allowing for as much excess supply in the market to allow more consumer choice. And as demographic reality has caught up with us, we're seeing some shortages and difficulty in keeping pace, despite the challenges that home builders have had with supplies, lumber, appliances, and so forth. Home builder sentiment is still very strong across the board looking at the NEHB housing market index for housing overall, and for single family, and expectations of sales, expectations of traffic, and so forth, all looking really good. Some people are calling the current economy kind of the bottleneck economy. We saw the jobs report in April come in well below expectations. And what we're seeing as we unpack that, there's a dozen different theories out there. Nobody knows for sure about why exactly that's happening. But we are overall seeing some supply chain constraints. The cost of getting things from China's tripled from pre-COVID. And it does take a while for the labor market. If any of you were out there doing hiring in your own firms, you know that the hiring process takes some time. Real estate market, as I mentioned, struggling to keep up with demand. We are seeing some job declines, even though we're seeing job growth across other sectors. A lot less demand for couriers and grocery store workers as people are getting back to working in the store, and the activities like Instacart and things like that are falling off. Something else that maybe wasn't on everyone's radar is just the unavailability of childcare. If you look at the participation rate of women in the workforce, it's down. It's still down. It dropped during COVID, of course, and it's yet to recover. And part of that is that schools and daycares are still not fully reopening, and many women, moms in particular, have not been able to come back to work, and that's creating a drag on the economy. If you look at the big picture across March and April, you see a lot more people moving into employment, some moving into unemployment, but much less. Some moving into not in the labor force categories, but those categories are a lot smaller than what we're seeing in terms of moving into employment. So given those statistics, our expectation is that we're going to continue to see a strong recovery, and April will turn out to be a bit of an anomaly. When we look at where on the residential side the demand is, urban versus suburban, we're really overall seeing a lot of demand in more suburban and exurban areas. Part of that is that we're seeing the growth in the demographics of the millennial generation, who is doing what millennials or people of that generation in their 30s and 40s have always done, as they pair off and get married and start thinking about having kids and want to get out of a rental apartment into a single family house. They go to where they can find that affordable house, and that's tending to be in less urban, less dense areas. When we look at where the migration is across the market, we've seen a lot of growth out of big coastal cities, which sort of correspond with the places that are the most expensive places to live, and a lot of migration into smaller markets: Raleigh, Charlotte, Jacksonville, Austin, which has been red hot. Even Boise, Idaho, seeing demand. So a little bit uneven in terms of where that activity is happening. Our forecast on the housing side, continued strong demand. We are worried about rising costs, lumber, appliances, labor, diminishing lot inventory, with builders running through their lot inventory pretty quickly. Low interest rates have been a really strong inducement to buy. But there is some talk about inflation. It's probably overstated, but as the market gets hot, if the inflation does start showing up a little bit stronger, which it could, that could have an impact on those low rates. I think one of the most exciting things for real estate, though, is just looking at the demographics. Demographics are destiny, and you look at we're looking at another 8 million people in the ages of 30 to 50 when people buy houses, and another 17 million people moving into the older age ranges that have already, own houses, but looking into maybe thinking about, active adult housing and other things that are really strong, here in Florida. That obviously bodes very well. I could go on, but I won't, because Barry will probably give me the hook. So Barry,
Well,
with that, I'll throw it back to you.
that's one of the benefits of Zoom call. The hook doesn't work, but thank you, Greg. That's been very informative. I'd like Jay, who's actively involved in marketing advisory services in residential real estate, to kind of give us an overview of where we are, how we got there, and he and Jimmy can kind of give both the micro and the macro reasons as to that happening. I don't think anybody envisioned what was going to happen in the residential market a year ago. So Jay, if you could lead us off in that direction, I think it'll be for an interesting discussion.
Thank you, Barry. It's truly a privilege to be speaking with all of you today. And I guess I'd say that we're probably smarter than we thought, because looking at Greenspoon Martyr's expansion across the domestic United States, we seem to follow the same footprint. So I guess we're making smart moves along with you guys. That's encouraging. I think I think we all understand now that the residential real estate market, at least in the state of Florida, has seen unprecedented growth throughout the pandemic. And frankly, I think at this point, we're continuing to see that type of momentum across all of our major markets. Initially, in sort of March of 2020, we saw a flood of inquiries coming into the single family home market, people looking to control their own environment, people essentially looking to have freedom of use, whether it was someone renting a pool or buying a home. The migration from the Northeast was tremendous. And with that, we saw an inventory issue and prices starting to surge 50, 75%. And at the same time, we saw a real flattening out of the vertical residences or condo market. And it was for this opposite reason. People were unsure as to the ramifications of COVID-19, how condo operations would be able to operate their buildings in safe ways, what building management would do to address these concerns. But sure enough, as the single family home market started to become tighter and tighter and prices more and more aggressive, we saw people becoming more comfortable, and a movement back into the condominium market, which has now pretty much throughout the state of Florida seen the same type of momentum, velocity, appreciation. And as that market has seen and begun to see inventory issues, we've seen a number of local developers that have come into our market from other markets start to really look at opportunities in all of the markets in Florida, which I think is a very important point. With the rising of values in most of the markets in Southern Florida, people were faced with an interesting decision, and that was, do I take my money off the table and sell my $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 home for $3, $4, $5 million, or do I stay in my residence? And that the answer to that question was a little bit complicated, because if you were selling your home, it left you with the predicament of where am I going to go? That option involved a higher price point and an increase in your real estate taxes. And the other option was, do I stay in my residence and potentially move out of the region I'm in? And I think that stimulated some of the more northern markets in Florida, where people could buy a property for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. So I think overall for the state of Florida and the residential side, this has been extraordinarily optimistic. And I think it's very important to note that unlike what we have seen in the past, where we were sort of subject to a boom bust cycle, we now have transition in this market that I think is much more stable. These are end users, these are primary residences, and we, I think, can feel a lot of confidence in understanding that this transition is transformational for our state. And I think it will continue to impact more than just what one might consider rural or single family home. And I think we're ultimately going to see tremendous strength in the city centers, people wanting to work and live and operate within the markets that they can walk within. And so overall, I've never been more encouraged and confident in what our market has experienced and enduring. And I think that I suspect Jimmy would agree with everything I'm saying. What do you think, Jimmy?
Thanks, Jay. Well, first of all, it's great to be here, Jay, with you and Greg and Barry. Thanks for affording me this opportunity. I can't believe it's almost a year since we last spoke, but a lot has has occurred, and thank God we're all here safe and sound and be able to speak. And for those that were affected by COVID, I send my sincere thoughts and prayers with you, and hopefully it all came out good. It was a difficult year, but we are coming out of it, and I think we're coming out of it with a pretty clear direction. Although I hate to always be the pessimist in the room, but I do like to look at the cross currents and make sure we fully understand them. Not saying that they're going to knock us off course, but that they do need to be recognized and internalized and then respected, because right now we do have huge demand. We have limited supply, but therein lies some problems with the perfect storm coming, right? Because you got manufacturing delays, which both Gregg mentioned and Barry mentioned earlier. You have customer inventory, which is down. So supply side economics is going to tell you that, when you have low supply and huge demand, prices are going to go up. And I know Gregg said he wasn't really concerned about inflation, but I am concerned about inflation. I think it's real. I think it's here to stay for the reasons that Jay just said, because we have limited supply and huge demand. And it's coming from everywhere. It's coming internally from people moving and selling, and externally from people migrating to our state. But you're also going to start to have delays in products coming online, because the things we don't think about are the appliances being delivered on time, or the steel or the wood or the concrete or the plumbing fixtures that are being shipped in from offshore. The slowness or the problems dealing with freight right now. So there's a lot of external factors that are affecting our product side, which is going to cause prices to go up. And then naturally, just through supply side economics and so much money on the street, we're going to see probably 6 to 7% GDP this year. I don't think we've seen that since 1984. So we have huge growth. We have limited supply. We have the cost of concrete up, cost of steel up, cost of wood and building supplies up. Those are real inflationary numbers. If you go to the supermarket, you'll see marks up, milk is up, eggs are up, rice is up. If you're in the apparel industry, you're going to see cotton's up, cost of manufacturing's up. So these are real concerns, and they're not just up by 6%. Yes, we have 6% growth, but you have double-digit inflationary numbers coming online. Look at gas. Gas has gone up almost double. It's gone up 75% in less than a year. I mean, those are real everyday consumer items that we rely upon to function as a society. So when these prices go up exponential, much far greater than actual GDP, it causes a problem. But the white elephant in the room that I'm worried about is labor inflation, because right now we have a problem. And the problem is twofold. Number one, there's 8 million people on the sidelines that we all see and we read about, and they're not coming back to work anytime soon, at least until September 30th, because they make more money staying home than they do going to work. And these are the people that make the minimum wage. And most businesses and most industries need these people to help produce and produce the supply. You can't get labor. You can't get people on job sites, construction sites. You can't get anyone to work in the restaurants. You can't get the laborers to work in the hotels, doing the food and beverage or doing the housekeeping or the property services. You can't get landscapers because they were making $10 an hour. And I'll give you a perfect example. At one of our properties, we raised in the last 4 months our minimum wage from $10 to $11 without the government making us do it. We did it just to keep employees. We were losing employees and we can't hire people to fill. We have a 40-person shortfall. We then went ahead and just raised it to $12. Well, every time at this one property, we raise $1, that's a $200,000 hit to the bottom line. So how do I make that up? Does it come out of my pocket? Do I raise my prices? So I think we're going to start to see the effects of inflation, and I think it's going to hit people in the pocketbook. So, the savings that Gregg mentioned is not an anomaly. That trend was happening pre-COVID. People were saving money. We became more of a savings state. Credit card debt was going down. So I don't see the trend going to all this pent up demand where we just go spending. I think people are spending out of necessity, not out of, just out of luxury. And so I think we need I'm not saying we have to fear these things, but I personally pay attention to them because they're real. And with the inflation on labor, that's never going to reverse. Think about that. And that's probably the biggest expense in most industries and most businesses. So we're going to have to contend with that. So the cost of goods are not going to go down anytime soon, in my opinion. I also see, two more things, Barry, and then you can jump in.
Sure.
I see treasuries going, 10-year treasury going over 2%. I mean, we're definitely heading in that trend. So I don't, right now, we are the biggest buyer, the American government's biggest buyer of our own debt. But I think that's all got to stop. It's not safe. And so we're creating a very unstable economic environment for our children and grandchildren and future, especially with the debt that we keep taking on. So I'm very bullish for 2021, maybe into 2022, but eventually the tire is going to hit the road and we need to pay attention to all these cross currents.
Jim, you talked about, inflation and pricing. I'd like to ask each of you what you're seeing. I'm seeing it with many of my clients, particularly in the residential apartment area. Projects take about a year from the time you start until get through the permitting and everything. And then pricing is so difficult because a deal or a project that priced itself very well 6-8 months ago, today doesn't price itself. And so, what are you seeing with your clients and yourself as far as going out and doing new projects, being able to get comfort that you're not going to have significant cost overruns?
Well, leave it to real estate practitioners to be faced with unprecedented demand and still find reasons to be pessimistic. I think you
don't have to sign the cost overrun guarantee.
were we to flip and say, let's trade this current situation for 2008, 2009, any takers? I'd say we probably wouldn't find any. So I'll take the challenges of dealing with supply constraints and inability to meet demand over the last recession any day. Not to minimize the fact that there aren't problems. And to clarify what I said earlier, I'm moderately concerned about inflation. I think it is going to go up, but I think it's going to be short-lived. As I think we're kind of getting through. We had a dramatic slowing of the economy, and now we're trying to ramp back up. I think the unemployment benefits impact on labor is a theory. There's a lot of theories. There's still sort of unproven where that is. But one thing we do know is that labor force participation by women is way down and much greater than the numbers relative to people on unemployment. So I think as we solve that, as things open up again, and women in particular, for whom child rearing falls the heaviest in our society, I think we're going to see a big return of people into the economy, and I think that'll help. I am concerned. I think what Jimmy was talking about in terms of the impact on materials costs and so forth. Those are real concerns. They will impact pricing. We have seen pricing come up in the residential real estate side. At some point, that's going to be hitting affordability. I think maybe the good news, bad news is that in the residential space, only about 15% of the market is buying new houses, and in particular, less than 5% go into master plan communities. A lot of the market is buying resale stuff. Anyway, that market's very tight, and that's been very good for the new home industry, sort of forcing more people in there. We are doing a lot of multifamily work, underwriting, figuring out what pricing can be. And so far, although we are looking at, obviously very genuine concerns about where costs are going, we, so far so good, knock on wood. We are continuing to be able in Southeast Florida and Central Florida and North Florida, continue to underwrite multifamily projects are still looking viable. There was some concern in markets like, Fort Lauderdale area, for example, where we had just a tremendous pipeline of multifamily and a lot of new buildings coming online. We did see a little bit of a drop in lease ups during COVID, but that's really come to an end. We're seeing that the whole lease up pace is really picking up again. And so I guess maybe I'll be the optimist in the room a little bit, unless Jay wants to jump in. I agree with Jimmy that those are genuine concerns we need to think about on the cost side, in particular, both labor and materials. I think it's going to work itself out as we kind of shift back into a functioning economy again and get this COVID thing somewhat behind us.
Greg, you and Jay talked about migration and the movement of people to different areas to develop and own residential and other types of real estate. Jay, could you maybe give us some insight? I'd like to hear from the three of you as to why you think that migration is occurring and why it's accelerated so much.
Well, I mean, thanks, Barry. I just want to address the last point as it relates to pricing the market, and then I'll come to the point about the basis for migration. Most of the developers that we're working with, and we're probably working with 30 or so developers right now, they're ultimately a year or so into their planning. And when that planning began, we were talking about pricing that is probably half of what it is actually today. So the increase in costs, although material, have no material detrimental impact on the initial underwriting that many of these developers considered. In the condo space, we were looking at projects throughout South Florida in the, arguably $1,000 to $2,000 per foot price range. Today, those same products are trading at double that. And uniquely, we would historically see a great headwind in selling a project prior to breaking ground, a real groundbreaking. And until that groundbreaking occurred, the velocity was slower, the price points were challenged. And as soon as the building started to come out of the ground, of course, velocity increased. Today, the number of transactions that we're doing right out of the gates is unlike anything I've ever seen. And so when we used to think pre-COVID that our market was strong, I think, I would liken it in Miami Beach. It used to be hands across 95 or 395. Today, I think it's hands across America in a lineup trying to get into our state. So I think the demand and the value of our product is outpacing the cost of the materials. I think what Jimmy says about workforce is a whole nother issue, which I agree with, and I think it is a concern, and I think it's impacting all industries. As it relates to the demand for our market, I mean, there's so many variables now that are just screaming, come to Florida. Our lifestyle has always been tremendous. Unfortunately, in the past, people tended to learn about this when they retired. Today, people are saying, why should I wait until I'm old? I want to move here now. I want to raise my children here. I want to have a life here. COVID accelerated that materially and gave all of those that thought they had to wait 10 or 20 years a reason to do it now. The taxes, no state income tax, the inability to deduct your state and local taxes, that may or may not change. But even if it does, the momentum is so strong and the maturation of our market has been so significant in almost every element of the market that I can think about. Things that I know Jimmy and I care very dearly about: our medical centers, our educational institutions, our cultural institutions, our infrastructure, our legal leaders, and everything that really makes up this tremendous state has been pushed to a higher level. And we've not only matched that demand, I think we've exceeded it. And I think that has now created a snowball effect with many of those that are moving here saying to all of their friends and businesses, hey, listen, you're crazy if you don't come check out what this state has to offer. And I'll tell you one, to finish up this statement, recently we've seen a surge of high net worth individuals coming out of the California market. These are people that own major companies in the technology space. And although they're the first ones to make the move, usually for tax basis, once they get here and they realize that they can actually house their companies here, I think it's just the beginning of what we're going to see. And I like to tell people we're in the early innings of a doubleheader that we're going to win. And I think once you see the other levels of industry start to move here, instead of just the owners and the CEOs and the C-level executives, but you see the workforce, I think you're going to see another surge in our market. And I think that's where all these great rental products are going to be capitalized upon, because I don't remember there being so many luxury rental products coming into our markets. And I think a lot of people are going to capitalize on that. And I also think a lot of those are going to be, financing's better for, multifamily than it is for condo. I think a lot of them are going to end up becoming condominiums.
I just want to say something, Barry, to Jay and Gregg's. I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm born and raised down here in South Florida. Yeah, I bleed homey. You know, I'm about as homey as they get. I'm very bullish on South Florida. I'm very bullish on Florida. And there's a lot, as Jay and Gregg said, you know, the equation has just become larger and the variables involved in the equation have become more. And so it's very difficult to try to work inside a vacuum where you can control all the variables and make them constant. That's just not the world we live in. And ever since we became a global society, it's even become more difficult to, you know, predict. And theories are just that, they're theories. What I was trying to say is everything's rosy, everything's good, but we got to keep our eye on the bouncing ball because the ball is bouncing all over the place. And there are these cross currents that are real. And we've been burned by them before, and shame on us if we ever get burned by them again. But going back to your one question, Barry, which I'm not sure was really answered, is with underwriting a new multifamily development, yes, it is very difficult, whether it's for sale or for rental. But one of the things that we are benefiting from, and Jay touched on this and Gregg as well, is that the demand is so high that we have the luxury of just increasing our prices by the time product comes to market. And that doesn't always happen. That's like, you know, when the music stops, who's ever the last one standing gets hurt. So those that are in ground today or coming out of ground, you know, I think they're fine and that they're going to be able to adjust their pricing so that these exponential increases in their labor costs and their material costs are not really going to affect them. As if anything, they may end up, you know, doing far better than what their underwriting showed because the demand is just so far outpassing the supply. And we still have a huge shortage. We discussed this the other day that there's over a 50,000 unit shortfall on affordable housing.
That's where I want to go, Jimmy. Actually,
Right.
That's exactly what I'd like you to discuss because everything I've heard so far in the residential area, and it's incredibly beneficial, but it seems to be driven by people having money and therefore being able to afford to get into this increasingly more expensive housing. We had a affordable housing issue before all of this. It seems to be, in my opinion, something that is lagging in this tremendous growth that we're having. And I'd like to see and hear from you all as to how you think where we are today and where we're going in dealing with affordable housing, because to Jay's point, you know, we're getting these C-suite members coming in and these industries that want to come down here. But they need to, when they come down, the things that are important to them other than the lifestyle of the CEO is education, cultural activities, and housing for, their employees. And so this is a big issue that I don't see I'd like to hear where you see things happening in the affordable housing arena.
Well, I just want to touch on two things. We keep looking at this as an anomaly because of COVID, our growth because of COVID. There was a migration coming to Florida, Louisiana, Texas, Arizona pre-COVID. COVID just exasperated what was already taking place. And as Jay pointed out, people were forced to come down here because they didn't like what was going on in their own states during COVID. And they realized, wow, this is a great environment. A, the weather's phenomenal. B, it's a no tax state. There's all these personal life benefits and economic benefits for moving to Florida. So that just exasperated it. But we do have a shortage of workforce housing and affordable housing. And I think it's something that needs to be dealt with. And I know the state's looking into it because in order for all these companies to come here and follow the CEOs and the presidents, they need to be able to have quality people follow them to fill the voids that are going to be in the offices they open. And those people need to have a certain lifestyle and be able to afford a residential home or a residential apartment. And, everyone thinks of affordable housing as Section 8 or subsidized housing. That's not true. Affordable housing is also workforce housing. And it's defined at different levels. And actually, in a lot of areas, it's almost market rent based upon certain definitions within each market. So it's going to be up to the local CRAs and the state government, I think, to get involved with some type of assistance and funding or entitlements or grants, because you can't afford with the current pricing today, at least we're finding this out. In fact, I'm underwriting right now a 360 unit luxury, but a portion of it is going towards affordable workforce housing. The numbers don't make sense. We have almost a $15 million shortfall. And we had to go to the CRA and get the CRA entitlements and grants and for infrastructure and other cost reimbursement, just to make the underwriting work out so that we could have a product that's coming online that can be absorbed with market rents in the general vicinity. So there is going to need to be some type of government agency assistance in order to build all the affordable housing. But the good thing for the state of Florida is we were given $6.6 billion in a use it or lose it over a 3-year period from the federal government through the federal aid program. And $4 billion has already been strategically allocated by the governor and the Tallahassee. But there's like another $2.5 billion. And, you know, everyone's vying for it. You got the education vying for it. You got the hospitals vying for it. But it really needs to go towards workforce housing and affordable housing because there is a huge demand for that.
There is. I think one of the things that policymakers fail to grasp sometimes too is the relationship between the traffic congestion that we don't like and affordable housing or even workforce housing. Because what we are seeing is that as the younger generation that embraced urban living, and many still do, and urban places are still great and thriving and tend to be attracting a lot of young people. But as people pair off and start thinking about forming families, they can't afford to live in the closer in urban areas, and so they're doing the old drive until you qualify, which we've always seen, and that means that they're living farther from job centers, and that means you're probably following them in to the office in the morning, and that's partly what's contributing to all the traffic congestion. I think there is a big issue, in particular with families being really priced out of our urban areas or our job centers.
I agree with Gregg. Yep.
2 quick comments. I ultimately think that we're going to have local municipalities tie in approvals to a component being workforce housing or lower income housing. And I also think that we haven't even seen what happens when the floodgates open from other markets like Canada and Europe and Latin America, and the pressure that that's going to put on our residential market. So I think we're going to have a housing issue.
You know, it's interesting. Jay brought up the floodgates opening from the outside markets, Russia, Asia, Europe, South America, which was usually most of the demographics coming to the South Florida market. And the type of product that they were looking for was a smaller product. So one of the things we've seen, and Jay will attest to this, is that there's been an evolution of the type of product that you have to put online right now to be absorbed by all the people coming in. So the average size of a luxury condo just went from 1,600 to over 3,000 square feet. So now you're going to see all this product being redesigned to meet the current needs of the locals, either moving to condos or the people from the Northeast or California or the Midwest that are moving down here to meet that demand. And then when the floodgates, to quote Jay, open back up, you know, are they going to buy that product, or are they going to want their old product, which is going to maybe cause another building boom for a different type of product? It's going to be very interesting to watch this all play out. I don't have the answers, but there's a lot of interesting dynamics to this economy.
No doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, your question, where do you, go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, you know, we designed a product in Surfside called 87 Park, sold out. The last 12 units in that building sold to existing unit owners that were bought to expand the size of their existing units, which, by the way, were already at in excess of 2,000 square feet. And I do agree with you, Jimmy, that the historic Latin American buyer was looking for a smaller footprint. I think we have become a more expensive, less speculatively opportunistic state. And I think the types of people that are going to be able to afford to live here are unfortunately going to be those that are willing to pay a higher price for the newer product. But I think that does open an opportunity for people. And I think there are developers that are looking to this to build a more quote unquote micro type product that will be able to be afforded by those potential buyers or investors and service that part of the market.
Right. Well, your finger is certainly on the pulse, so I'll follow your lead, and I hope you're right. Jay's being modest. He didn't tell you how good this market is. One of his projects sold out in 30 days over $455 million, I believe it was, in 30 days. So the market's strong.
Very much so.
Is it sustainable?
I believe it's absolutely sustainable. I think, like I said, we're in a very early stage. The demand that we're seeing from all of our feeder markets, California, New York, New Jersey, Boston, Chicago. By the way, many of these are states that are facing humongous financial challenges. It is so robust. And, you know, as I think Gregg mentioned, or maybe it was discussed the other day, the demographics of our country are such that there's a huge population that naturally migrates to Florida for lifestyle purposes at a, you know, empty nester or retiree stage, and they have more money than they had 10 or 20 years ago in many cases. And so I think you're going to continue to see redevelopment. And I think we've got 2-3 years of really strong demand, which will ultimately, I believe, lead to demand in other sectors of our housing market, office, industrial. I think we're in for transformational positive change.
I really want to thank the three of you. I come away from this discussion very optimistic, very hopeful, especially in residential, but also in the other areas like retail and hopefully hotels coming back. But mindful that you need to be careful of some of the warning signs, as Jimmy talked about, that you need to be careful of as you're planning your project. So I really appreciate all of you participating today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Pleasure. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.